Okay, welcome Internet world. This is a live Google Hangout, and it doesn't show any other viewers on as of yet at this moment. So we can do this introduction while we're waiting for anybody because the live feed will be available for people following this discussion. My name is Rob Kidd. I am the Conservation Program Manager for the Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club. I have with me here Emma Schoenberg with VPIRG. Hi, Emma.
Hello.
Eric Becker of Clean Yield Assets Management.
Hello.
And Lauren Hurl of the Conservation Voters.
Hello.
And you're the political director of the Conservation Voters.
Right.
So good. So welcome all, and I see we have a couple viewers coming on. So this is a nice little innovative tool to use, so we don't have to drive around adding more carbon emissions onto the planet. And I know there's folks who are trying to participate from all corners of the state. So we hope to use this as a great way as an introduction to what has been happening with divestment. I've heard on the street a couple of people say, well, the divestment is dead. It's far from true. Divestment is really happening, and we've made some incredible progress. So just to give some feedback to people, on this screen, should be on your dialog box a question and answer button. You can type questions onto that, and if I see something come up, just type your question in there, and I will try to read it off to whoever is presenting at the particular time. Also, if you have problems with that, you can always use the email fashion, and you can email me at rob.kidd@sierraclub.org, which is robb.kidd@sierraclub.org, and I can read the question off. So just as a reference here, I want to acknowledge that this campaign, divestment campaign, has been a campaign that's been in the work for many years, inspired by our friend Bill McKibben. And I know VPIRG had initially started working on this a number of years ago, and 350 Vermont has been carrying the lead of the issue for the last few years. The Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club joined in, and Eric Becker has been a volunteer with them. Vermont Business for Social Responsibility chimed in. And our friends here, Emma Schoenberg with Vermont Public Interest Research Group, and then Lauren with the Conservation Voters. So I am just going to leave it off for there for now and let Emma just do a quick little background of what happened last year, why we're at this point up to this. So Emma, welcome to the conversation. I think you should be the lead. You should be on the main part of the screen right now.
Wow. Okay. Great. So thanks, Rob. And let me know, there seems to be some feedback, so let me know if the technology isn't working. First of all, I really want to recognize even more so the work that led up to where we got with divestment in 2016, because it was this really widespread effort and a lot of work with different groups, and once this coalition really formed in 2016, when we had the opportunity to, we were really able to expand on that work. So that's important to acknowledge that it wasn't just this spring that divestment really started going. But as of 2016, in the State of the State address, Governor Shumlin really decided to make a call for divestment. This was right in the heels of California deciding to pass legislation that required divestment from coal specifically. And one thing that really set apart what Vermont was trying to do under the call of Governor Shumlin was to really add in not just coal, but also ExxonMobil to our divestment call. This was a really big thing for Vermonters to do because nobody had added a specific big oil company yet to the movement, and that really made a difference and really did follow on the work that was being done in California. That continued for a while, that push, that opening doors there. And on February 25th, the Vermont House actually started a resolution. That was H.R. 013, which really urged Beth, Pearce, and VPIC to consider divesting from coal and ExxonMobil really citing the financial and moral imperative to the futures of Vermonters and our pension fund. So this was a really important step to get the House really on our side and really having these conversations. Along the way, there was the beginnings of what might have been heard in the news as the controversy of what divestment was. Essentially, this governor versus treasurer dynamic that was really setting up to be a big fight. This was while 2015's divestment bill, S28, was still being argued about in Senate Gov Ops, and it wasn't looking like it was going to go anywhere because people were uncomfortable with the idea of a financial mandate telling people what to do with their portfolio, which really did make sense. So taking a resolution approach was a really great idea to let Beth Pearce and let the Vermont people know that this was an initiative that was supported, but really time to start a conversation about the financial responsibility that was attached to it. So addressing it from both a financial and a moral side. The governor ended up showing up to a Vermont Pension Investment Committee meeting. He gave a very long speech. This was part of his platform for the last couple of months of his campaign, or his term, really. So there were a lot of conversations being had, and Beth Pearce and VPIC really did listen to that and integrate it and start hearing it, and they heard both from the House resolution but also from the Senate sign-on letter, where we got about 17 senators to sign on to basically the same wording as the resolution. So movements were happening, and we were building a big collaborative effort, which eventually led to where we are now, with the support of both Beth Pearce and the House, and a good chunk of the Senate. We eventually were able to form the subcommittee, which you're going to hear more about. And once we took legislative mandating off the table, it really was allowing this collaborative process where we could figure out what was financially responsible for divestment and really move forward with a conversation that was clear and had a good outcome in terms of really doing the study behind the work behind it. So that's really the beginning, and I don't know if there's a way to take questions, but that is pretty much what took us through spring to about March or April when this subcommittee really started getting underway. That's it. Rob, I think that you are muted, so I can't hear you. I don't think Eric can.
There we go. So thank you, Emma. Always these fun technical glitches happening. Thank you very much for the update of what happened during the legislative session. And I know a couple of people have had problems trying to find the question and answer button, and I know Eric just said he found it on there. You can be able to ask question and answers virtually if anybody has anything, but I don't see anything. If anybody does have problems with the question, try to use the chat button, and I'll go back and forth to that particular point. So, Emma, if there's something comes up, you can send a message through chat, or I can see you visually through the screen, so you can point through. But I'm going to bring Eric back on and let Eric fill in. But while I'm bringing Eric to the screen, I just also wanted to reference that our other lead partner, Austin Davis of 350 Vermont, is not able to join us today. He had a prearranged trip all across the country, so he is nowhere near any type of technology. So I just want everybody to be aware of that. So he is a vital part of this campaign, and we owe him a lot of credit for his hard work. So here is Eric Becker of Clean Yield Assets Management, and I'll let you start talking in what's been happening post the legislative session, and you can fill in the details, and I'll click back on if you have any problems or any questions come up.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Emma. And just if anybody does want to type in questions, there's a little icon on top right part of your screen. Just has the 9 little squares that make up a square. If you click on that, that'll bring up the Q&A icon. You can click on that and then ask questions that way. So picking up where Emma left off, the VPIC, Vermont Pension Investment Committee, formed a subcommittee this spring to look into the possibility of divesting from fossil fuels in the state pension funds. And its mandate was to take a look at divesting from coal and ExxonMobil in particular, and as well as the broader question of divesting from fossil fuels more broadly, and looking at the potential impacts in terms of risk and return and costs on the pension funds. And so there were some productive meetings in terms of thinking about a process for doing this, and what was arrived at was a proposal to hire an outside consultant that would work collaboratively with the existing pension consultant, New England Pension Consultants, that has had a long-term relationship with the Treasurer's Office and the pension funds, to come to a consensus view on this issue about impacts on risk and return and cost to the funds of divesting from fossil fuels. And taking a step back, actually, from that, the New England Pension Consultants, or NEPC, had completed 2 studies previously, one in 2013, and then an update to that in 2015 that they did with the Treasurer's Office, that were very negative in regards to the question of divesting from fossil fuels, and were deeply suspect. The way that the studies were constructed had a lot of bias built into them, and so there was real skepticism that NEPC could offer any sort of really unbiased approach to this question. But Treasurer Pearce was concerned that if we just brought in an outside consultant that didn't collaborate with NEPC, that then the pension committee would be confronted with having one study that says one thing, another study that says another thing, and no way to reconcile them. And so she was concerned about that, and she modeled her consensus approach on the way the state economists work, that there are 2 state economists that come up with a consensus view for the governor and the legislature to do their budget planning. So the treasurer invited me to help craft a request for proposal that would go out to consultants, to qualified consultants, specifically those that deal with state pension funds or municipal pension funds, and that have experience with social investing, and in particular that have expertise on climate issues and fossil fuel divestment. And I was charged with developing a short list of those qualified consultants, which proved to be more difficult than I anticipated. There really are only a handful that have this kind of expertise. Thankfully, I was able to find 3 that met all the qualifications and were interested in the work, because there are not a whole lot of funds available for paying the consultant. $40,000 was the amount that the Treasurer's Office was able to come up with. She tried to get the Governor's Office to kick in some, but they did not come up with anything in addition. So it was just a $40,000 job, which in the consulting world that these folks are in is not substantial. So it really limited the appeal to the groups that really were focused on these issues. So again, the RFP, the request for proposal that went out to the consultants, asked them to do to look at the 3 types of divestment, and then 4 potential impacts of divestment for each of those 3. So it was looking at coal divestment, divesting from ExxonMobil, and divesting from fossil fuels more broadly, and then it looked at the impacts on risk, return, the transaction costs of actually doing the divestment, and the fees associated on an ongoing basis with hiring investment managers that will adhere to the fossil fuel divestment restrictions. So we got, in the end, we got 2 strong responses. One from Mercer, which is a global investment consultant that's really been in a leadership position on both social investing, or ESG, environmental, social, and governance investing, for quite a while, and they really have had a focus on carbon risk for the past several years. So they were highly qualified. And the other was PCA, Pension Consulting Alliance, which is based in California and has worked closely with the California state pension funds, which are in the process of divesting from coal after their legislature passed a bill requiring that. In the end, it was PCA, or Pension Consulting Alliance, that was supported by the subcommittee, and I actually have not talked to Treasurer Pearce since the meeting last week, at which the PCA was officially selected, and there's a process of preparing a standard contract, state contract, and so I'm not sure if that's actually been signed yet, but that's the path that we're on, is hiring PCA. So they have a lot of experience focusing particularly on coal, but more broadly they've looked at fossil fuels and climate risk, and they have a great pedigree as far as the types of pension funds that they've worked with. California obviously is the biggest and one of the most influential pension funds, not just in the country but in the world. So they really are well qualified to do this work. They estimated that it would be a 10 to 12 week process, and as part of that process there'll be some phone interviews and discussions with existing investment managers. They're obviously going to have to work somewhat with NEPC to arrive at a consensus view, and so that process should be getting going in the next couple weeks. So this is going to work its way into the middle of the fall, essentially, or even late fall, before we get a final report to the Pension Investment Committee. But I'm optimistic that we're going to get something that's even-handed. It may not be exactly what we want to hear as far as all the outcomes, but I think it'll be a good study. The other outcome, or other piece of this that's emerged as we've gone through this process at the subcommittee, is that there's been an increased awareness that the current social investment policy that the pension committee has is outdated and needs some review and revision to really reflect the latest thinking on how pensions should be dealing with environmental, social, and governance issues and integrating them into how the portfolio is managed. And so at a subcommittee meeting earlier this summer, there was a panel of 4 lawyers talking about fiduciary duty and making it clear that taking these kinds of things into consideration were absolutely consistent with the fiduciary duty of the Pension Investment Committee and the investment advisors that they hire, and furthermore that the existing policy was in need of some freshening up. And so that emerged in that meeting, and then at this most recent meeting last week, there was more discussion of some minor revisions to the policy, but also the idea that the so-called ESG policies should be applied more aggressively in terms of the way managers are hired to manage funds for the state. So I think there's a door has opened there to some more so integrating environmental concerns more directly into the whole investment management process for the state. So I think that's another really encouraging outcome of this process.
Eric, I just want to just reference there are a couple of people who sent me a message saying they're having problems like finding the chat button or the question and answer button. So there's just like it's normally on my screen. It comes up on the left side of the whole Google View thing. Otherwise, you can still email me at robb.kidd@sierraclub.org. So, and then I will read off the question if anybody does have any questions. So it's robb.kidd@sierraclub.org. So I just wanted to interrupt that. So if anybody does have a question, I can, but I've gotten notified about that. So go back.
I was done with my piece, so I'm happy to turn it back over to you.
Okay, so I am back, and actually I just want to click on to Emma to see if she may have any further things while I'm going to get Lauren in too, and then I'll remove you off while we can go to Lauren, but I just wanted to see if Emma had anything to say. There you go, Emma.
Still muted.
Emma, are you on mute yourself, or?
Maybe, yes. I guess.
There you go.
I guess
Good.
I was on mute. Okay. I don't have anything really specific to correct Eric on or say that he missed it all in any way. I think that it's been really interesting to watch the divestment movement kind of grow in a way as we move away from the more traditional legislative approach. I do want to mention that in terms of the overall national divestment movement, Vermont is in a really unique place, and I think that's really important to recognize. It seems like we are far behind than places like California or municipalities like Seattle and San Francisco and Providence, because each one of them have passed legislation that says, yes, we're going to divest, but that's just a commitment, and there's still that addendum at the end of it that says if it's not, it does not fall within fiduciary responsibility, we're not going to do it. It's merely a legislative commitment to research it. So I really want to say that it's interesting to see us, before we even take the legislative approach, doing the steps that everybody else would do beforehand, before we even get to that point. So we're really doing our research, and I think that's really important to point out as terms of the overall divestment movement. That's one of the only things that I notice not getting spoken about, and I think it's a good thing to mention.
Good. Thank you very much, Emma, for your comments. And before I hand it over to Lauren, is the Vermont Pension Investment Committee is actually taking comments on their ESG policy. And I have problems with sharing this on here, but if anybody is on the Google Hangout, there's a link that says Showcase. And on this, if you hit onto the Showcase button, it's like a yellow tag. It has all these different links to some of the articles and websites, including the Treasurer's website, which is vermonttreasurer.gov. And then you can click onto that for retirement and VPIC, and then there'll be a link for the email address for that. So you can actually access that. And you can submit comments to the treasurer on the process. So, but I'm going to continue this off and to let Lauren fill in some of the details. Is one of the things as a community we can do is be involved in elections by talking to our candidates about positions, certain positions, and influencing their stances on things, and that's always a very good thing. Just before we get into it, is the Sierra Club ourselves has not gotten an endorsement in the gubernatorial race for a variety of different reasons at this particular point, but we have gotten involved with the lieutenant governor's race, but I'm not going to mention this because I know 350 and VPIRG are not being able to get involved in elections, so I'm not going to reference who our particular candidates were at this time. But Lauren, with the Vermont Conservation Voters, I'm going to let you speak now and give your updates.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Great. So I just wanted to give everyone a brief update on where the gubernatorial, lieutenant governor, and treasurer candidates stand on divestment to the best of our knowledge at this point. And before I kind of go through that list, I think it's just worth remembering how incredibly valuable having Governor Shumlin come out and really take this issue on in his inaugural address and then really be a leader on it and pushing it. So just can't really overstate the value of having elected officials that are going to champion this. And I mean, we got so much further in the VPIC committee process and are making a lot of progress because of that kind of leadership. So and that I think was hugely due to all of the efforts that the advocacy groups were doing, pushing on this issue and raising it. So kudos to 350 Vermont and Sierra Club in particular for being early champs on this. So the candidates for governor so far, there is a spectrum, so there is a real difference between them. We've got Matt Dunn, who has a really strong statement and position on divestment. He really lays out that that there's going to be stranded assets, that we have no business being in fossil fuels that we know are contributing to climate chaos, as he puts it. So he really has a very strong position, consistent with a lot of the groups on this call. And it's been for fossil fuels across the board. So that's been his position. Sue Minter has had a position up publicly saying, let's divest from coal. We have no business being in coal. I checked in with her campaign manager today, and she said Sue's position is we should be getting out of all fossil fuels. She did say, we want to make sure we do it in a fiduciarily responsible way, but we should be getting out of fossil fuels. So that's their latest position. You then have Peter Galbraith, the other major candidate for the Democratic nomination, who opposes divestment. And then you've got both of the Republican candidates for governor, Phil Scott and Bruce Listman, also both opposing divestment from fossil fuels. So in the governor's race, some real differences there. Lieutenant governor, just focusing on the Democratic side, so you have Dave Zuckerman, who's been a senator and who in that chamber was really a leader in trying to help with the letter that was mentioned by Emma, and you had so he's been out front on this issue. You've also got Keisha Ram, who also in the House, as she's been a representative this last year, was stepping up and really helpful in the resolution that passed. And then you have Shap Smith, who was key to helping bring the divestment resolution that ended up passing to the floor. So you've really got some good candidates there, all supporting divestment. I haven't heard a position from Randy Brock, although I assume it's not his favorite thing. I don't know if anyone knows and can add that afterwards. And then I did just want to note for the treasurer's race, it was interesting because we've had Beth Pearce, who, as you've heard, has kind of come a long way from her original position on this and is really working collaboratively to try to make some progress on this issue. But there was a candidate, Richard Dunn, who is running, who his point in running, his big issue was divestment and wanting to push the treasurer on this and really make this an issue in the candidacy. So great to have these issues raised to that kind of level during campaign season. So that's kind of the just big picture of where people are. And then just wanted to finish up by the candidates continually at forums, events, debates, just your ability to make a phone call or send them an email, let them know that this is an issue you care about. It really does make a big difference in shaping how they view these issues, which issues that they think Vermonters care about and are thinking about. So definitely encourage you. Obviously, if you get on this kind of event, it's an issue you care about. So taking the time to do that, to let all of the candidates know across the board that it's something you care about and hope they will pay attention to and support, really makes a difference. So urge you all to take the time to do that. So I will just leave it there, but thanks for the opportunity to share these thoughts. Rob, are you back on?
There we go. I am back on, so thank you very much, Lauren. I just wanted to add something in here. You referenced Treasurer Beth Pearce. For those who are listening, VPR had a debate yesterday on between Beth Pearce and candidate Richard Dunn. As you said, Richard Dunn is focus is on divestment, and I haven't listened to it myself, but I'm going to, because Treasurer Pearce actually called me to say that, to reaffirm that she is committed for a fully open process on this. So some of these forums, when questions are asked, it forces a candidate to come out and actually respond, or even respond back to us. So any comments you are all able to do is really good thing to do to kind of make the draw greater attention to it. So actually, I did get a question emailed to me, so I'm going to add on Eric and add Emma back onto it, because we want to get them be able to speak into it here. Show and broadcast, and these little symbols are not the most easiest. There we go. Okay, so Eric, did you see this question on the sideboard? I'll read it here. You there, Eric?
Yep.
Okay, good. The question I see that is listed. Do you have plans to let the public know about these developments, especially the decisions to get another opinion about the effects on pension investments? Many people still believe the initial report saying millions will be lost. So that's what I asked, and David, who asked this question, this is one of the things why we're trying to get people to be aware of, is that there's other reports coming out, and we hope by you elevating the discussion, the media will cover it a little bit more, and will bring out greater attention to it. But Eric is involved with the actual consensus review, I'm going to let you speak up a little bit more about this process, just to clarify any concerns.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, the New England Pension Consultants did a study in 2013 that essentially said it would cost $9 or $10 million a year in foregone investment returns in order to divest from fossil fuels, and then they doubled down on that in 2015, sort of up in a slightly updated version of that. And so the number $10 million a year, $9 million a year was thrown around. I mentioned that the study was really poorly constructed, and it really violated some really basic rules of investments and investment ethics, frankly, which I testified to in front of the Vermont Pension Investment Committee and the Senate Government Operations Committee, because I think the Treasurer's Office and NEPC had no business throwing around those numbers, because they were really based on a poorly constructed study and didn't actually reflect what the divestment campaign was calling for. Namely, it looked at historical returns of energy stocks versus the rest of the stock market, and the period of time that they looked at was a period of soaring oil prices when energy stocks did very well, and they just said, okay, well, these stocks have performed better than the market for the past 10 years, so we're going to assume they continue to do that, which in fact is the reverse of what you should do if you're a good investment advisor, because things tend to revert to the mean. Things that have outperformed during the past tend to underperform in the future. So they just said, okay, this trend is going to continue. It was really irresponsible. So that number we then also pushed back on in terms of a study that we released in collaboration with Corporate Knights and 350 and others that looked at what if the pension funds had divested when we first called for it in the fall of 2012, what would the returns have been over the subsequent years? And it found, now I'm going to forget the exact number, but on the order of $75 million in foregone returns by not divesting in the subsequent 3 years, using the portfolio holdings and then looking at what would have happened if we had stripped out the fossil fuel stocks back then 3 years ago. So it dwarfed the figure that the NEPC and the Treasurer's Office had been using, but going in the other direction. So this current study will again look at it in a much more even-handed way and look at both the risk and the return. And there's there's more data available now, better data available now, and there are more investment options for folks who want to divest from fossil fuels. So yes, we definitely need to do more public outreach to let people know that number that was being thrown around is not legitimate. And I think that'll be part of the process when we get this report released this fall.
Okay, Eric, I have another question here from a good divestment friend. This is actually just before I respond to it, is a lot of the best way for some of you who are actually on this call to make an impression is to send emails or send letters to the editor. So I want to personally thank this next comment that I'm going to read is from Dan Quinlan, who asked this question, and Dan has written many letters to the editor, and it helps raise the bar on these issues. So the question he has here, do we know to what extent the analysis will look at forward projections versus backward-looking analysis of the fossil fuel companies and their prospects?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Mercer, which was not hired to do the job, had the most robust model of climate impacts and on the stock market and on the financial markets in general, and projections of how various scenarios would result in financial returns changing over time. So they had the most forward-looking approach, but they were not chosen. PCA has some of that, but not as robust. So it will look forward, not just backward, but that's something that's going to be part of the process to make sure that they're really looking at carbon risk and climate risk in a meaningful way as they do their study.
And I want to add something into that question. Is in one of the subcommittee meetings, we had a whole discussion about the different studies, and one of the consultants that came in from out of state was basically said any study from even 6 months ago is out of date. So like even though like they've kind of produced a study a year ago, 2 years ago that said it wasn't within their fiduciary responsibility to do, the market has changed a lot. So yeah, so I think kind of like the forward analysis and is a really good way to go at it, Dan. And also because the market is in, the question is what happened in the legislative process, and Beth Pearce keeps saying is fiduciary responsibility and whether they can divest and still be within their fiduciary responsibility. And the claim is, as long as there's a logical basis for that to happen, if there's a logical basis for them to be able to divest, there would be no court in America that would consider that being against their fiduciary responsibility by divesting. So I just wanted to add that point to that. Does anybody else does Lauren or Emma have anything to say about that? Okay, because I have another question. So somebody else, another question. Well, has anyone prepped a one-pager on why divestment is a good idea from both a fiduciary point of view and otherwise? My thought was that if we had, we could use it as we contact our reps between now and January. Well, first off, I'm going to answer that question quickly. Is one of the things is one-pagers. The one-pagers change just based on what current data needs to be done. So we've had things based on that, and one of the things is I think VPERG may have something, and I know Austin at 350 Vermont may have something new, but that's something I think we need to. Emma, would you like to say something on that? Do you guys have anything new?
Yeah, so I did make a one-pager, which I sent about to mostly to help out people writing letters to the editor. One side of it is the national divestment movement and kind of where that's been going, and a bit more about the basics of what divestment means. And the other side of it is kind of the overview that I gave earlier, where we've been, kind of where we're at, kind of ends around the subcommittee process. And, you know, could probably delve more into the very specifics, but are very, again, as Rob said, those are very quick to go out of date when you're printing out copies of them. Also, they're pretty nuanced, hard to put in bullet point format. But I'd be more than happy to start sending that out again as well to anybody who might want it as a resource. I also have a letter to the editor kit that I put together that has a mock letter to the editor on divestment. Again, those same bullet-pointed things, and just some tips. So if anyone's interested in that as well for their personal use, I'd be more than happy to send that out to people.
Good. So I don't seem to have any other questions on here. So and I'm not sure. Does Lauren? Do you have anything else you want to add just to our discussion before we close this off?
Don't forget to vote. August 9th primary. Coming right up. You can vote at your town clerk's office anytime between now and August 9th, but we need to elect pro-environment people that will carry this this forward, so let's all do that. Vermont Conservation Voters, I can't not say vote.
Good. And actually, Lauren makes a really good point, even within that, about getting out and vote. Elections even mean a lot more than that. Getting out and vote, get out and support the particular candidates who support our views, go out there and volunteer for their campaigns, do other those things, because if they are making bold statements on that, they need our support in order to do that. And I know all of our organizations are really good at kind of giving the backbone, but that's something I really encourage people to do. So thank you, Lauren, and thank you for your work on that. And we'll see what happens August 10th, but then we'll have a clearer picture of who the candidates are, and it'll be a smaller field, and we can focus on that. So thank you.
Thanks.
So I am going to end. Eric, do you want to go? You want to say something else before we end this up, or?
I'm good.
Okay. Well. For everybody else who's on this, who's watching this, Eric's service to us on the divestment movement is phenomenal. Last week we had this divestment subcommittee meeting, and I'm sitting there listening to it, and I really actually had no idea what everybody was talking about. So after the meeting, Eric had to translate some of the information to us. So if you ever cross paths with Eric, thank him for all his work with this whole divestment movement. He is a critical piece to us, and he deserves more than an award. He deserves praise from everybody out there. So make sure you all praise him.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks.
Oh yeah, I'll do that. So. And I am gonna. But you don't have anything to say.
Who, me?
To end it.
No. I would just say it's been a pretty extraordinary experience in terms of going from a really adversarial situation with Treasurer Pearce to one where we're really working closely together and collaborating. I never thought I would see that. We were testifying head to head in the Senate and saying not very nice things about each other or each other's work, but never getting personal. But it was it was hard to imagine that we'd get to this situation. So I guess it's a little bit of a lesson, I guess, in Vermont politics, or maybe something more general than that. But it's gratifying to see how this has evolved. And I have to give credit to Governor Shumlin as well, because I think if he had not come out and put his weight behind this in the State of the State address in January, we probably would not be here today. He's not getting what he wanted. He wanted something to happen much more quickly, but that wasn't realistic, given pension funds don't move quickly, and there's good reason for that. And they have to be careful, and Governor and Treasurer Pearce has been good about process, and so I think there's a lot of praise to go around. It's good to see how Beth has shifted her views as well, and has taken the new information as it's come out about this whole about divestment generally and about climate risk. And I don't think she took it seriously 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and now I think she really sees it as a real financial risk to the pension funds, and she wants to do right by the beneficiaries. So we're making progress. So it's exciting. Like I said before, I don't think we're going to get everything we want, but we're going to, I think, get something positive out of this. And despite Vermont not being way out in front on it, we still have the opportunity to make some real headlines if we do this right. So I'm excited to see what comes of it.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I'm just going to actually ask Emma if she has any other comments just before we end this off. But actually, Emma was one of the newer people to the campaign, because she got hired in by VPIRG to be their divestment coordinator or divestment organizer. And I know she's been moved on and been promoted and hired full time. So congratulations, being with the VPIRG team. So congratulations on that. But do you have anything to say, Emma?
Well, I've really enjoyed working on the divestment campaign. I think that it's a really wonderful example of how much power is attached to the symbol that is money and our dollars in our portfolio. And I've really enjoyed engaging Vermonters over this issue and talking to them about it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the next steps that we take with it. And I think it's a really unique process that we've been down, going from this legislative to this more administrative step. So, yeah, even though I'm moving out of the field and into the office, this has been a really great opportunity. And again, Eric, I really think that you can give yourself this huge pat on the back for being personally interested in something and pursuing it, and using your expertise to make change happen. That's been really inspiring to see. And Rob, and even Austin, though he's not here, the amount of time and effort that you've put into this has been really quite phenomenal as well. So thank you for that. Thanks for being wonderful to organize with. And for the people that are watching, this is very much still something that's happening. And again, write those letters to the editor, contact Beth Pearce. That is the main thing that I can end this with, and keep an eye on it.
Good. Well, and Lauren, I gave you closing comments, so we're not going to go back to you, because otherwise we can go back to around in circles again. So thank you all for joining us. There are some people who weren't able to join in. They emailed me, but there is actually a YouTube link for this I'll have. So I can be able to share that, so we can share this around even more for those who weren't able to join us live. So I'll be sure to send that to you all. So thank you for the viewers who are still on. And if you have any questions, you can still email me at robb.kidd@sierraclub.org, and I can relay the questions to any of our 3 other people on here too. So thank you very much for participating. And as Lauren said, make sure everybody goes out and votes on the Democratic primary or the Republican primary too. I keep forgetting about that. So thank you, everyone.